Welcome back to the Carp Chronicles podcast. This episode is most definitely for those of you who pay an interest in bait and want to make their bait more attractive to carp. I'm lucky enough to be invited up to the British Aqua Feeds factory by Callum Wilson. I had a look around, looked at all of their hydrolysis equipment and the other parts of the factory. Absolutely fascinating. The stuff that they're doing up there is genuinely exciting for those of us who are interested in new bait products. After my tour, I sit down with Callum Wilson, who is the director, and I talk through different things that they are working on, new products, where Callum sees the industry going, what we can do to make our bait more attractive to carp, and a whole load more. It was absolutely fascinating. I thoroughly enjoyed my time up there, and I really hope you enjoy listening to the interview with Callum. Before we jump into that, of course, I need to announce we are sponsored by carphuntergiveaways.co.uk. I've said it before, I'll say it again. These guys are awesome. They give a proportion of their profits back to war veterans who suffer with PTSD. And just the prize draws themselves are absolutely fantastic. They have got everything that you can think of there, from bed chairs, bite alarms, bivvies, even bait. So check them out, carphuntergiveaways.co.uk. And lastly, before we jump into the interview, of course, we sell our own bait these days. Nothing like on the scale of British Aqua Feeds, but we sell some flavours. We've got some really interesting and unique powders coming to market as well. So if you want something out of the norm to give your fishing an edge, go ahead, check out baitbros.co.uk. It's all exclusive to us. It's very unique, and I wholeheartedly believe in every single product that we release. So check us out. baitbros.co.uk. That's it for the intro. Let's jump into this interview. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Callum, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to start by introducing yourself, giving us a brief history of who you are and how you got into the position that you're in today?
Right. Hi, everybody. My name's Callum Wilson, and I'm the director of British Aqua Feeds. Brief history on myself. I'm just, and I repeat, just over 50. Started fishing at the ages of 6, 7 years old, going through the motions of learning the tricks of the trade, float fishing, ledgering. It eventually came through to sort of like the specimen side of things in the mid to late 80s. Probably just as a carp fishing boom was about to take off. So then I've always had a keen interest on why and how things work from a bait point of view. The early days we had the likes of Rod Hutchinson, Richworth, etc, etc. Then came along the Nutra baits and the Premier baits mainline. And I've, over the last 20 years, I've studied to quite an in-depth, self-taught, read a hell of a lot of wheat and chaff, that's scientific journals, and I've been involved in the bait game for probably about the past 15-20 years, from an industry scale. Started off working at Sticky Baits as general manager. Sam Anderson brought me in 2011. Unfortunately at the time things didn't go to plan. He sold out to his brother Tom. Tom decided he could do my job, so I was asked to clear me things and leave, and ended up Steve Carey approached me to run a company called British Aqua Feeds. I always said at the time, with a bad experience I had at Sticky, I would never get back into it, but I think it's more of a love for all things bait related that we think, oh, one more try can't harm anything, can it? So we got back into it, and Steve explained his vision of why he set up the company called British Aqua Feeds. Probably a lot of people know that we're very closely related to DNA baits, so the main emphasis was to bulk buy the ingredients for DNA, and on an offshoot is obviously if we're buying 30-40 tonnes of this material and DNA only take 20 tonnes, have we got an outlet to sell it? So this is why I was brought in, because of the knowledge I gained and obviously the customers I built up previously, and working with the likes of, example, say Nutribates or whoever, I had some good contacts in the industry where I thought, yeah, I could maybe get rid of some of these ingredients, these oils, these liquids that we're trading. Started trading in 2016 in Pollington in a 1,000 square foot unit, and today we have 27,000 square foot, probably more than I can handle. And obviously things have gone from strength to strength with the investment that Steve's done into the business to drive it forward.
It's an impressive setup here. I've lucky enough to have a walk around with you, and we'll definitely get into the whole production side in a little bit. Just to clarify then, were you with British Aqua Feeds from the ground up, or was it already established when you came in?
Steve had set up the company through Company's House, but
Right.
He wasn't actually trading. So he brought me in, obviously, to oversee DNA's requirements on the ingredients and liquid side. And then what surplus stocks we had, we was to trade to the various manufacturers of baits out there, see what customers we could pick up. So it wasn't actually trading when I set up. So we didn't start trading till February 2016. So in effect we've been trading just over 5 years.
Yeah, and I think in that time it's fair to say you've become the premier bait ingredient supplier for the home roller. What do you think has been the key for you making such a rapid headway within the market?
I think being a home roller before myself in the late 80s, mid 90s, and knowing what they want in retrospect to quality ingredients, supply of quality oils, and especially the booming hydrolysates. People, the fishing, the home bait roller, the bait manufacturers, they have quite rightly a love for hydrolysates. They really do, and they are, to me, probably key number one attraction in attracting a fish, because of the actual makeup of the hydrolysate, which I'm sure we'll come up to a bit later on.
Definitely. Well, I think we'll slip into it now. I mean, I know BAF's been making leaps and bounds in the realms of hydrolysates. I know you've got some new things you're working on. I'm sure you want to talk about some of them. Can you, before we jump into that kind of thing, can you just explain to those that don't know, what is a hydrolysate? Why should we be paying attention to it?
A hydrolysate takes basically a long chain protein and breaks it down into what we call smaller chain peptides, ditripeptides, and if you want to extend that further, into free-form amino acids through the use of what we call endo and exopeptidases. Now, endopeptidases cleave the long-chain proteins down into smaller peptides. Exopeptidases cleave the actual individual amino acids from the shorter protein chains. So obviously anybody who has a rough idea on how a fish is attracted to a bait will know that amino acids, it's how does a fish realise that there's a bait there. It's through its sense of smell. They have two, sense of smell and a sense of taste. Now obviously how does it know that its food source is there? So this is by the amino acids given off from a particular bait, or it might be what, if it's a living creature, it might be what it secretes. See, everybody, when they eat something, in general terms, they have to have a poo out. So and that poo is full of stuff that your body doesn't want, yet it's broken down into a molecular level. So that poo in itself contains various amino acids, various ammonia, nitrates and stuff. So this is what the fish are attracted through a chemo attraction.
You mentioned peptides as well as amino acids. Obviously, we all get wrapped up in the amino acids and the attraction of those. As far as peptides go, have you looked into whether, in the first instance, peptides are attractive to carp, whether it fits their chemoreception key? Or is it something that you try and minimise from the bait? Is it something you try and maximise within the bait?
Depends on chain length of the actual peptide itself, you would probably have to shorten that peptide chain into what we call dientripeptides. But you come across a catch-22 situation here, because through the use of enzymes and the hydrolysis techniques, when you shorten anything, you get a significant bittering action.
Mm-hmm.
So we overcome that through the use of an exopeptidase, which cleaves off individual amino acids, which reduces the amount of debittering, and we use enzymes such as flavozymes, which enhance the flavour or the aromatics of that particular hydrolysis or hydrolysate you're making.
Flavozyme, that sounds made up to me. Is that a real thing?
That's just basically the name the enzyme supplier will give a particular product.
Right.
What they will do, there will be a mixture of endo-exopeptidases, particularly around the glutaminases that free off glutamic acid, to give it that umami smell.
Yeah.
If you're making a meat hydrolysate, for example, they will concentrate those that will pronounce the actual aromatics from particular amino acids. So that's where they concentrate their expertise on.
Yeah. So, UNAMI's interesting, isn't it? We were talking about John Baker before we hit record, and I know that's something that he's been very much into for many years. So just to go back to these flavour enzymes, it's not an enzyme bolted onto a flavour as we would know it. Presumably,
it is actually a protease enzyme. You know, okay. Most enzymes are proteins themselves.
Yeah,
they work, to simplify things, they work in a lock and key.
Yeah,
your key fits a lock, it unlocks it, and then you're able to open the door.
So the flavour aspect comes from the fact it changes the flavour of the product. That's why it's called a flavour enzyme.
Basically, yeah, it'll liberate certain amino acids and certain short chain peptides to create a more aromatic compound from that hydrolysate, and that'll increase a sense of smell, in particular to us humans. And then obviously from that, we know glutamic acid is quite stimulatory from a fish's sense of taste, rather than a fish's sense of smell.
Yeah.
So, but obviously, knowing where the receptors are within a fish is how you've got extra oral, which is outside the mouth, and then you've got intraoral, which is inside the mouth. So you've got to look at various aspects when you're making a hydrolysate, right? What you're trying to achieve, who is it for? As I've explained, a lot of our hydrolysates will be going into the pet food market. So people don't understand, they think it's all about the fishing bait, whereas obviously there's two companies involved here. There's British Aqua Feeds and there's British Animal Feeds. So we're making these hydrolysates for the pet feed market. But the joy about it now is I can tailor specific amino acid sequencing to target a carp, to maybe target the barbel, whatever route I decide to go now. And we've got lots of things in the pipeline for this, not just based around obviously meat. We have to look at it a little bit savvy and think, right, what's sustainable? Everybody wants krill.
Yeah.
People love krill hydrolysate. When it was on the market, it was a damn good hydrolysate, but we've got to be a bit more adventurous, so we are obviously looking at the insect hydrolysate. We've done some small-scale trials. Obviously, our sister company DNA uses the insect protein meal within the launch of the new bait, the bug, which has done tremendously well. But we're working with various bodies, Ferrosciences, which are part owned by DEFRA, part private investment owned. We're working with these on a weekly basis of how best to achieve the making of these hydrolysates moving forward as a more sustainable source.
Yeah, and because people are going to want to know, they're going to go mad for this. You mentioned krill briefly, and you spoke to me about it earlier. That's something that you're going to start producing again, right? Krill hydrolysate?
Yeah, everything we produce, we have to be validated from Animal Plant Health Agency. So we have to give them what we call a HACCP plan, which is a Hazard Analytical Critical Control Point plan. Because it's all right you having a pressure cooker, you shove some raw Cat3 ABPs in there, add some enzymes in, put it to the correct temperature, the correct pH, let the enzyme do its job, and that's everybody thinks that's it, it's all great, but it don't quite work like that. Because we're governed by the registered body, we have to go by their regulations. So we have to forward a HACCP plan, and it's all about biosecurity. Since mad cow's disease or the BSE crisis 20 odd years ago, we've obviously Animal Plant Health Agency was born to protect A, humans, and B, animal feeds. So we have to abide by their rules, and part of their rules are, as you've seen walking through the hydrolysis room, there's biosecurity involved in there.
Yeah, rigorous.
Yeah, so because we're using Category 3 raw materials, we have to make sure it's biosecure. And that, if that means, dressing up in your mad white professor's outfits, your hair nets, etc., washing your hands, cleaning down of equipment, getting microbiological results for Salmonella, Enterobacteriaceae, Clostridium perfringens, we have to abide by that on every batch that we produce. So the validation of the actual product we have to validate, or every particular produce we make, we have to make sure that it's microbial free for every single time we produce it for 30 different batches. And as I've explained, just the testing alone on one particular product has cost in excess of £2,000 to be tested from a microbiological level. That's before we get into any analytical detail of what percent protein it is, what percent moisture it is, what percent lipid, what percent ash it is, etc.
And all of that analysis is done out of house, isn't it? So that
yes, we have to. Animal Plant Health Agency say we have to use what we call a UCAS accredited lab. So they have to be accredited to a UK standard. A bit like, say, an ISO 9000, these laboratory companies, and for a particular microbiological report such as Clostridium perfringens, which is actually an airborne bacteria, there's very few up and down the country, so finding one of them was just a task in itself to get this. So, and then there's obviously a cost. They're not going to do it for anything, nor is anybody else. So for every batch you're doing over this 30-day validation, this is when, people don't see probably the costs involved.
Yeah.
Then you have to produce a material. So if you've got an enzyme vat or a vessel that'll hold, as an example, 2,000 litres, we then have to produce for 30 days a minimum 60% of its capacity. So then we're producing 1,000 litres or more of liquid liver or liquid krill. So we've got to produce that on 30 separate days, get 30 separate results. So then we're stuck with holding about £70,000-80,000 worth of raw material alone. Then there's the cost of your enzymes, your manpower, your overhead. So people just don't realise. They might think, oh, there's carp tax on this product, there's carp tax on that product. But the reality of it is a £500,000 investment into a hydrolysis plant, which is basically a small-scale plant in comparison with other hydrolysate producers around the world. But it all has to be recouped somehow.
I was taking photos of the factory when you were saying it, but I think you said even the water that gets washed through the machines to clean them, you have to pay for that to be taken away and disposed of correctly? Is that right?
Yeah. The what we call Cat3 waste water. We obviously had chemicals like caustic soda. We had certain antibacterial cleaning agents that go through all the pipe work, etc. that can't be just dumped anywhere. So what we do, from an environmental side of things, we then pump all the wastewater into an IBC that's labelled up, as you saw, Cat 3 wastewater, and then we have to send it off to a waste processor who will handle Cat 3 wastewater.
And I'm guessing that's not cheap.
Well, it's everything's a cost, isn't it? At the end of the day, enzymes are far from cheap. Obviously, enzymes, probably used at between 0.5 and 1.5% weight for weight of the substrate it's acting on. So for every, say, 100 kilo of produce you've got there, you might have to use upwards of a kilo or a litre of enzymes to act upon the substrate. So, and you can imagine they're not cheap. And some of the enzyme suppliers, they'll say, right, our minimum order's 100 litres. So then you've got to think to yourself, well, there's all this cost, and then you've got to look at supply chain. McDonald's can't get a milkshake, Nando's can't get any chicken. So, and then you think, have I got enough?
Yeah.
Have I got 15 tonne of chicken liver to cover this validation? It's very, very difficult at times.
You mentioned chicken liver there. I've got to ask, any plans to do any other liver hydrolysates? Beef is what I'm thinking.
I get acids probably on a daily basis. Yeah. Now, our chief vet and Animal Plant Health Agency has categorically ruled any beef hydrolysate to be used as a no-no in aquaculture feeds. I'm not saying, don't use it, but she has, obviously because of the BSE crisis, she will not allow us to produce a beef hydrolysate.
So is that just hydrolyzed beef, or is that any beef product?
It should be any beef product.
Any beef product.
If you look at all the feeds that Coppens, Screttins, Ala Aqua, they all produce, you won't see a single beef product in there.
So what does that mean for a smaller rolling outfit? Yeah, someone that may be selling, I don't know, 500k a month. That kind of setup, it still applies to those, or
it applies to everybody.
Everyone, yeah.
It applies to everybody. Everybody that's registered through DEFRA, through Animal Plant Health Agency, you're not allowed to use beef products.
Okay.
But obviously, at the end of the day, it's not up to me to say what Joe Bloggs next door can use. If he wants to use beef products, that's his call. I'm not here to police it. It's the job of the authorities.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I understand that. Obviously, I walked through your hydrolysis plant, and it's space age stuff. I'm guessing, well, I know actually because you showed me, but the temperatures and the pH, or not as much on the pH as I thought, but they both have to be regulated quite closely, right?
Yes. Any enzyme you use will have an optimum temperature. As an example, a particular endoprotease that we use, its optimum temperature will be between, as an example, 55 degrees. That's its optimum temperature where it is producing the hydrolysis at its best. So we have the commercial boilers set up whereby they're automatically generated to put the heat through the vessels at that 52, 53 degrees, and we can control it to within 0.5, 0.1 of a degree of them parameters. See, when you're paying a couple of £100 a kilo for a particular enzyme, and you can't achieve that 50, 55 degrees, I think you've got to say to yourself, all right, I might get 50% effective hydrolysis at 40, 45 degrees, but is it worth it? So we have to have the equipment set up in place. And as you saw, we've got the thermocouples in each of the vessels that record the temperature purely for Animal Plant Health Agency, but for obviously the guys operating the SCADA screens, that records temperature every minute inside the vessel.
So you've got a chicken liver going right now, haven't you?
Yeah.
Which is at 77 degrees. Is that as hot as it gets? Do you have any that go high?
With the vacuum evaporator, because it's steam. It's a steam plant or steam-driven plant. Right. The vacuum evaporator, the steam is around about 139 degrees C.
Wow.
Now, obviously, when we produce a hydrolysate, we have to give it what we call a microbial kill, whereby, one, we're obviously reducing the risk of any microbial contamination from salmonella, from enterobacteriaceae, and two, we have to inactivate the enzymes, because otherwise the enzymes will carry on working as long as they got a substrate to work on. Mm-hmm. So there's two ways of going about that. Obviously heat, by heating it up for a certain temperature. Normally most of your enzymes are inactive around about 80-85 degrees for probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Some slightly higher, some slightly lower. And you can also inactivate the enzymes by pH side of things. As we said before, enzymes can be optimal between pH 6 and 8. So if you reduce the pH of a particular liquid down to 3.5, you virtually instantly cut out any chance of any enzyme activity. We preserve it with organic acids, such as formic acid. Formic acid is commonly used in the animal feed industry to preserve a product, stop it spoiling. So we're no different. We use formic acids quite cheap. We use a mixture of 3 different organic acids. Obviously, it can be commercially sensitive, but it does say it on our new labels what they are. Mm-hmm. So we use them, and we know from various studies that certain organic acids are quite attractive to fish. So if you've got the organic acids, you've got the amino acids, and the health benefits that go with the hydrolysates, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Absolute no-brainer. And that's why they are, quite rightly, so popular.
Yeah. Most definitely. So you get a lot of enthusiasts making their own so-called hydrolysates at home. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the thoughts are good because it's more of a fermentation.
Yes.
Which takes a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
Again, probably not quite as high temperatures needed for fermentation, but definitely I've messed around with some pretty potent bacterial strains. Obviously, avoid the gram-negative. If you're going to go out there and do it on your own, you can be seriously ill by using some of these bacteria strains. So stick to the gram-positive ones that you know won't cause you any side effects. One thing I didn't touch upon is when you're using enzymes, especially in a powdered form, just how dangerous it can be to the human respiratory tract.
Yeah.
So we have, I'll let you take a picture of the actual MSDS from the enzyme suppliers, and you'll be thinking, wow, why am I even thinking about touching this stuff? Yeah. You know, so you've got to be aware that you've got people here working for you. You've got to put their safety first. Obviously, you've seen the chemical cupboards that inside of the big yellow lockers that they all have to be locked away in and handled properly. So you just got to be careful. I mean, the home bait makers, they're making it on a small scale. You know, they might be making 5 litres of a liver. They might be making 5 litres of a fish, you know. And I think that's where a lot of your inventive stuff comes from in carp fishing. You know, when you look about it, if we didn't try anything, we'd be getting nowhere. So this is where I sort of like say, fair play to you, mate. If you could make that work for you, good on you. Because if we don't try and do something, if we don't try and ferment it and break it down to a micromolecule level, who else is going to do it?
Have you got any tips for them so they can be more successful with their own homemade hydros?
Yeah, I think the lactic acid bacteria is a good one to go down. Always, if you can, mince the produce up so the actual bacteria have got more of an open surface. to work on the substrate. Make sure everything's meticulously clean, because what you'll find is through fermentation you're breeding bacteria. Yeah, you're feeding the bacteria, and the bacteria secrete. A lot of it is what the bacteria secrete. The enzymes they secrete then actually breaks the produce down. I'll give you an example, classic one, Bacillus substilling. Absolutely phenomenal. Before you all go out there and rush to buy Bacillus substilling, just be careful what you're actually acting upon. I've used it as an example for breaking down chitin, because it secretes a chitinase, which is the exoskeleton of, say, shrimp, etc., which is very hard. It's made of hard polysaccharide material, so it's very hard to break down from an enzyme level. But bacteria secrete the chitinase breaks down the chitin. Hence, it's made the product more pure than just using certain enzymes alone. It takes a lot longer, upwards of 30 days in a controlled environment. However, the results are more than worth it. But if you're uncomfortable, don't risk it. The only thing I would say is, if you talk to somebody, or talk to a friend, or talk to people on the internet who are more familiar, if they're willing to help you, great.
I think it's the consistency as well, isn't it? For people doing it at home, I imagine you can't get it 100% consistent, like from batch to batch, like you guys do. But I'd imagine that's the main concern for them, isn't it? The temperature of they're operating in a store.
You can, if you've got a controlled environment. If you have a controlled environment, where I would always tell people to log down the exact amounts you're using. The amount of bacteria, the amount of water. They're obviously mixing water with the actual substrate, whether it be liver, beef, prawn, whatever they're trying to ferment. Write everything down, because there will come a time when you think, I'm getting good at this. And you're getting popular, maybe selling a few bottles here, there. Yeah, just make sure you write everything down.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So just sticking with hydros before we move on. In your opinion, what is the best hydrolysate that's been produced, either by yourselves or by someone else?
We've come across a hydrolysate in the last 2 years. It's not made by ourselves. It's one that obviously goes in DNA Bates the book. And given the amino acid profile, I've never seen anything that comes quite as close as this to the absolute ultimate hydrolysate.
On paper or in practice? Or both?
We've seen fish literally climb banks in videos that people have poured this neat hydrolysate into water. And just seeing the fish's reaction has just been absolutely phenomenal. When I actually saw the spec sheet through an email that the company supplying it sent to me, my eyes literally lit up. I was like, oh my God. I couldn't wait to run and tell Jess. I said, look at this, look at this, look at this. It's absolutely amazing on paper. But like anything, has to go through its trials and its testing, and it's the best hydrolysate I've seen used, but its usability is a nightmare.
In what do you mean by that?
Because of the physical state, how it changes on the physical side of things.
Can you expand on that?
Not really, because it'd be a bit commercially sensitive.
Yeah.
But it's in its physical state, when it's just been made, fantastic.
Right.
Leave it to stand a little bit, and its physical state changes, so it's very, very hard to work with.
So is this something that you're trying to get stable so it can be shipped out?
We've mixed it with certain other liquids, and sometimes it's worked and sometimes it hasn't. We've found probably the best percentage to use it at in a liquid form, mixing it with other liquids, is around about the 20-30% mark.
What kind of thing would you put that with?
You could possibly thin it out with water, boiled water itself. Probably use a thinner liquid itself.
Okay. And this is a insect?
No, this is not an insect hydrolysate.
Okay.
I've quite rightly gave Jace, he wants exclusivity and DNA baits with this hydrolysate for the next couple of years, so I've had to say, right, apart from my own personal fishing, which I don't get to do these days, that little ingredient is its baby, if you like.
So it's, sorry to harp on this, it has to be made and then put into a product quickly, is it?
Yeah, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of the physical state or the change in the physical state that happens, it's just an absolute nightmare to deal with.
Yeah.
It all sounds intriguing to the punter, and I bet they're thinking, right, can I have some of this? Can I have some of that? Well, no, you can't. Not for the next couple of years. But it's a phenomenal. I've never seen anything like it.
Is it in one of DNA's products that they sell at the moment, or not yet?
It is in the bug.
In the bug.
They've just released. It's quite probably the closest I've seen to it fish reaction wise. It's not very often I'm impressed with liquids and various, because I've probably 95 different ingredients and liquids you come across. Yeah. They all get chucked in the bin, but there's now and again there's one or two that's sort of like a bit of an eye opener. Beta Stim was a massive eye opener for me. The liquid betaine supplement that we sell. I was fortunate at the time to have my own lake with crystal clear depths. It was a lake called Silver Lake. You can see the videos on YouTube, and a lot of the filming done underwater was in 13-foot of water. You would think it was like tap water. But I witnessed the fish's reaction to the Beta Stim, and I'm like, oh my God, wow, is that really happening? And was it weather conditions? And then when you see it over and over again, and then the same with this hydrolysate, probably the only other liquid that's come close is probably the old L030.
Yeah.
Which people still say it hasn't been bettered these days, but this particular hydrolysate is as good.
And you think 2 years it'll be out on the market?
Yeah, if we can make it into a usable form.
Yeah.
That is a task. If I could have made that into a usable form, and obviously Jay said, yeah, no problem, you go sell it to the bait manufacturers, to public, but he wanted a bit of exclusivity on it.
Yeah.
Which quite rightly so. We work very closely with them, and they are our biggest customers.
Yeah.
So we offered them exclusivity on it, and we have to just sit tight and work in a way of making this more user friendly to the Joe public and to the bait manufacturers. But it's good. It's very good.
Feel free to slip me a bottle on the way out. Okay. So, I know you said a lot of these hydros, they're going up to very high temperatures. Are there any hydrolysates that don't reach high temperatures and you have fears around them then being put into a boilie that's then obviously boiled?
Yeah, I think we have to give it a microbiological kill. So obviously there's going to be a time where obviously people don't know what they're doing, and they might already have salmonella in that product. And obviously because they're not giving it that microbial kill, that obviously they're fermenting it at a perfect temperature for salmonella to breed.
Yeah.
So they might come across a case whereby there is a particular outbreak somewhere because of lack of hygiene, lack of standards. But like I said before, if these guys wasn't doing it and learning about what makes fish tick and learning about how we get new ingredients, new hydros and stuff like that coming along to the fore, a lot of these guys, they're the sort of like inventors of various products. So I'm not here to tell them they can't do that. I'm here to say, you carry on doing what you're doing, because I see you guys as the actual guys who make things happen.
It's a good point. Yeah, sorry, what I meant was, are there any hydros that shouldn't be heated up? So you produce several different hydrolysates. Is there any that don't reach that high temperature within your own production, and then people are going home, putting in a boiling mix and boiling it? Does that denature it at all?
Yeah, I think with obviously boiling at 100 degrees C, so you're always going to get a slight denaturing effect there. I would say, given that what do most people boil the baits for? Between 2 and 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Does the actual core of the bait hit 100 degrees?
Ideally not.
I think the reason why we boil the baits is A, to form a skin on it, stop nuisance fish, and B, we might be sticking it out 90, 100, 110 yards, in the throwing sticks, and it has to have a firm skin. That's the downside to it. So you will get some denaturing there.
Yeah.
But I think what you can do is obviously overcompensate a little bit. So say if you knew 30 mil in an ideal world was kept within that boilie or bait, 30 mil of that hydro was kept in there. If you know you're going to lose, I don't know, let's say 10%, you'd end up putting 35 mil of hydro in the bait to counteract for that maybe 10% loss you've got. You'll always get some form of loss. Exactly the same when you're using your powdered pre-digesting material, like your CPSP 90, your hydrolyzed liver powder. Because of the soluble nature of these ingredients, you will get some loss there.
Definitely. I mean, the whole heating up thing, it does aid the digestion of certain things anyway, doesn't it? I know not particularly around hydrolysates, but it's not all bad that we heat up our boilers.
It's not all bad. Obviously, you're there to, obviously, the nuisance fish, stop them attacking or eating the bait. Egg over mucoid, which is a well-known trypsin inhibitor, is inhibited above 71 degrees C, so there is some benefit there. People who use fresh eggs, most of your egg albumins and your whole egg powder are spray dried above that temperature, so you're inhibiting that side of things. Yeah,
absolutely. So last bit on the hydros, unless we naturally move back onto it, just everyone's going to want to know, what hydros do you foresee coming out within the next, let's say, 12 months from British Aqua Feeds?
Good question. Obviously, supply can be an issue. The krill one, I think, yes, but not probably in the amounts we hope for.
Right.
Obviously, we've got to look at the sustainability issue on that. And it's a fine line to whether you go for demand on a product because the business is going to be good, or whether you say to yourself, right, if we truly want to move forward, what else is there in the pipeline? So we know, obviously, I think as a lot of people do, there's going to be the insect hydrolysate. I think within the angling terms, quite a few people I've talked to, they're not that particularly fond of the insect protein, rightly or wrongly. It's maybe they've looked at it before and thought, this is just the actual shell and stuff from the insect, but it's the methods of producing it. The actual insect larvae meal have changed dramatically over the last 5 years. We now, don't know if there's a sample on the desk for you, Sam, but the actual insect larvae protein, no, that's the actual fat lipids, is a much more consistent meal. It's a lot higher in protein than when it first come out, and it's also been defatted. Insect fat itself, or the lipids from the insect protein itself, is quite high in saturates.
Okay.
So if you look at it as similar to like coconut oil, it can be quite solid at room temperature. Mm-hmm. So the last thing you need is a product locking up the signals coming from within your bait. So that's why we've chose, purely for the fishing and the aqua side to go down the defatted side. Now, obviously, from an animal or insect, bird food side, they want all the fats.
Yeah.
So it's catch-22. So we'll be looking at bringing both types of materials in for both companies.
So krill is a hydro that will be coming out. Insect,
squid, I'm undecided about. It's just the sheer price of the actual squid itself. If somebody can get me a squid for less than £3 a kilo, or for less than £5 a kilo, I'll buy a ton, no problem.
Are you selective with the type of squid that you get?
Yes.
Do you want like the younger, sweeter type squid, or?
Yeah, we use a particular brand of squid. It's a common squid. It's the Argentinian ilex squid. It works for us. It works on the enzymes that we use for us. You know, I know that particular squid quite well, and the enzymes that we use to break it down work very well with it. And to be fair, if I'd have known supplying cost would be an issue, I'd have never brought it out, because people love that hydro squid. They I get emails every day, when's a hydro squid coming back, you know.
Do you rate it?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Even though the profile or the actual spec of it is probably not as good as, say, krill, is not as good as the other hydros out there. For whatever reason it is, the squid seriously turns a fish on.
I think there's more to it than just amino acids, isn't there?
There
People
is,
get
yes.
so wrapped up in
when
it.
you look at, I don't like people to get too hung up on protein and amino acids. I would always say to people, if that was the case, look at the humble tiger nut. Just look at how insoluble that tuber is. What is it? And it's got a track record second to none. So don't get too hung up on protein and amino acids. Yeah, don't get me wrong, they are a vital chemoattractant. And quite rightly so, when you formulate a bait, be mindful of digestible protein within your bait formulation. But always keep an open mind to other things to consider.
Yeah. Lastly, just to save us getting about 50 questions a day, when do you think you'll get the squid and the krill hydrolysate out to market?
Well, the krill is the next one to be validated through Animal Plant Health Agency, so we have to produce that for 30 not consecutive days, but we have to produce that for 30 days, send all the results off to the Animal Plant Health Agency. As long as everything comes back from a microbiological level, then we're good to go with the krill. Now, obviously, I've got to look at it from a supply chain issue. Have I got enough to cover in demand? People, I know exactly. I've probably got forward orders in excess of £100,000 worth of krill. So I know the demand is there, especially Europe, the UK, even some pet companies want krill hydrolysate. But you've got to think, right, is it the way forward though?
Can you talk about the availability of krill? We spoke about this earlier, personally. Obviously, there's a lot of crap spoken, isn't there, about krill and whether it's sustainable, if there's much of it left, etc. Can you talk us through the standpoint on the state of krill, its supply and demand?
I think where we get the krill from, it's obviously these are what they call IFFSO registered vessels, whereby they have to adhere to a sustainability charter, whereby if there's 500 million tons of krill within the world's oceans, they're allowed to harvest. I'm not saying this is a true figure.
Yeah.
This is just as an example. They have to have a sustainability policy whereby they'll harvest 2% of that 500 million tons to save the whales. So they can only harvest X amount. I think personally what's happened over the last couple of years is they've been paid to sit at home. The governments have turned around and said, hey, this krill's getting bad publicity here. Here's 5 million quid, sit at home and do nothing for the next 2 years. Well, which, if somebody offered me that, yeah, I'd do that.
Yeah, definitely. So, ethically speaking, then there's no reason to be worried about the supply of krill.
I don't think so. I mean, we're a small-scale producer.
Yeah.
You've got to look at it. If a massive multi-billion-pound company come along and says, right, we're going to start producing krill hydrolysates, yeah. But in the same breath, we've got to be responsible. Because even though we are a big company, you know, we're dropping the ocean to these multi-billion-pound companies. We've got to say to ourselves, right, is it the right thing to do? You know, Steve has an environmental policy and he has a recycling policy here whereby 100% of our plastics are compacted and sent back to him for recycling. It's the same with the cardboard. Any excess cardboard, it's all baled and sent back to him for recycling. So obviously the gaffer's or the group director Steve's well into his recycling. That's his main forte of business. So if we don't follow his visions and his aims, he might turn around and say to me, that's not in line with company policy. Why have you done this? Why have you done that? And I can fully understand if he's in the recycling game and he's wanting to promote a healthier environment for everybody, we sometimes have to make decisions not based on business, because I know if I produce a krill hydrolysate on a reasonable tonnage level, I know that I'll bring in an extra £1 million worth of business. But is it the right thing to do? Tough call.
Definitely, yeah. I see what you mean there as well. Can you foresee any radical changes to carp bait in the future, either from development standpoint or regulation standpoint? Anything like that?
No, I think from a regulatory point, there is small changes coming in there. But until the government bodies stop your cost cutting and saying, right, we've got 2,000 bodies in DEFRA, but because of cutbacks and because of the pandemic, we're now cutting you to 500 jobs. That means there's 1,500 people less to police, enforce these regulations. So, looking at it as a whole, until the government bodies decide, right, yeah, we're going to clamp down on this, yes, we're going to clamp down on that, it's unenforceable. That's my personal belief.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. In terms of the development side of it, how do you... I imagine it depends on the product, but generally, what is the start of a new product for you? Is it that you just keep hearing about, people keep asking you for it? Is it something you discover? Is it a sample you get sent? Generally speaking, how do your products start their life?
I think it's what you get. You know, you get... before, when we first started off, it was... you was begging companies for samples of their products. But now the table's turned, because we've become a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and people are starting to take notice of you, and then all of a sudden, oh, do you want a sample of this? Do you want a sample of that? Do you want a sample of this? Hang on a minute, mate. 3-4 years ago, you didn't want to send us any samples. You was like, who the hell are Bath? But obviously, I'm very open to any ideas that come along, you know, new products, new ingredients. I can roughly say, yes, if a company wants to send me this particular product, you know, they're manufacturing this, yeah, we'll take a look at it. You've got a product sat on the desk, which has been rarely tested.
I did clock that when I came in, yeah.
That's, you know, a hydro yeast from the byproduct of ethanol production. So we thought, right, we'll take a look at this. The specs, it's not amazing, but it's not too bad. Shall we take a look at this? There's good availability of it. Shall we see what, you know, if this one's a work? So what we do is, like anything else, we have to go through a series of protocols that they have to pass a certain test, whether that be the tank test. You know, and then from the tank test, do we give it out to certain consultants? We might borrow DNA's consultants. Yeah, try a bottle of this, try a bottle of that. We might send it out to some of our good customers. Yeah, here's a bottle of this, here's a bottle of that. So then you build up feedback, over a period, a month or 2 months, and you generally find positive feedback. So then you make it on a wider scale. Anybody wants samples? You might put samples in with a customer's order. As an example, you send samples out to the trade manufacturers. So then you build it up, and you get that feedback from it. Is it as good as what's already out there? Because if it's not, I won't be bringing it out. It's as simple as that. So you might spend 2 years on a product that don't quite make the grade. So you think, wow, that's cost me about £20,000 in various stuff, and it still hasn't made the grade. But at the end of the day, if we didn't go through these, and if we didn't do the trials and all the trivials that come with it, how do we know? This is what I love, the development side of things. I brought a lot of things to the fore that working as a consultant for DNA for the last 7 years, helping develop the baits. I brought a lot of things that my knowledge of ingredients and how they work, why they work, has helped me. So if a rep does come to me and say, right, do you want to try some of this? It's the best thing since sliced bread. Send me a spec sheet. Send me the MSDS. Send me the breakdown of it. And then they'll go, oh, right, okay, yeah, I'll send you this. And I can virtually know straight away whether it's going to be a go or not.
How often do you hear that? This is the next big thing. You need to get on this.
I think a lot of it's how a company market it, media side of things. There has been some good things to come out in the last few years, not necessarily released by BAF. It might be released by another company who've got the noses in there first. So it's how you market it, how you media. Aspect side of it, social media. Desi looks after that side of things for us. He'll obviously use his expert knowledge, because if it come to marketing media from my side, I wouldn't have a clue. I can't even open an Excel file. So I can't, that's just the way I am.
Yeah. Okay.
In them respects. So it's how you go about marketing, how you build up. Mainline used to be very good at it. It took them 3-4 years to release a bait. By the end of that fourth year, they've got everybody on tenterhooks.
Yeah.
When's it coming out? When's it coming out? It's how clever they're able to manipulate the mindset.
This product here, can I say what it is? What's written on the bottle? That one? No. Okay, there we go.
No. We've called it, for now, we've called it hydro yeast. Basically, it's a mixture of yeast and wheat protein fractions from the byproduct alcohol industry.
Gotcha. So
we've been sent it because we work with some of the big companies. He dropped probably 1 litres off. I've asked him for 1,000 litres of it, an IBC. Unfortunately, they sell it in 29 tanker loads.
Oh shoot!
So I don't really want to mess about with 29 ton. But I shall. If he can supply an IBC of it, I'll take it to the next stage. Desi's already caught fish on it.
Hey, how'd you rate it, Des? Des isn't mic'd up, but
it worked.
It worked.
There's a lot more testing.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
A brand new product. There's a lot more testing, but I'm thinking, as with a lot of liquid yeast products, they tend to come into fore in the winter months, colder months.
Yeah.
So obviously from now onwards, a lot of people are going to have it in their minds about, using it for the winter bait. If I do get the IBC in before winter, I shall certainly give samples out to the various bait manufacturers and people who want samples to have a look at it.
Yeah.
And just get the feedback from there.
Yeah.
And we'll see how it is in a year's time. See what people's thoughts are. Is it working? Does it work? Just take it from there.
Fascinating. There's got to be a huge element of passion for this, rather than just selling things that work and never really move forward. It seems like you're constantly trying to find new products and things and advancements.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough years left in your lifetime, though.
Yeah, never ending.
Looking at that, I love product development. I love new things. A product like DMPT people are using to some considerable success now. I first came across nearly 18 years ago. I've messed about with enzymes over the last 10, 15 years. I've messed about with ketones, flavourings and such. There isn't enough hours in the day to cram it all in.
Ketones are an interesting one. Not for attraction, but energy, as far as I'm aware. What were your findings with ketones?
Very, very hit and miss.
Yeah.
We used... it was more to do with the bodybuilding supplement boom. We looked at raspberry ketones, and I looked a little bit more in the energy, or the mitochondria side of things from that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, can I pursue something down this avenue? Because obviously if you don't go down that avenue, you'll never know. And I found the levels to use were very, very hit and miss. It's the same with a simple product like caffeine and creatine. I was using creatine 20 years ago, messing about with it in updates. But for every time you're messing about with it and you're wasting another 3 nights fishing.
Yeah.
But if we don't do that, how do we know whether this particular ingredient works or not? So it's building up that knowledge over years and years. And now I tend to, obviously I'm more business orientated these days. So I've got to say, right, I'll look at something on paper, know it will work, and then take it to the next level of the testing.
Do you ever come across anything that would work well and would be really, really valid and worthy ingredient or product that just isn't economically viable, so you chuck it out?
Yeah, probably GLM. I think DMPT, when I first come across DMPT, or dimethyl beta propionthetin, as its name is, when I first come across that, I was scratching my nuts thinking, is this really as good as what everybody's making out, or what the manufacturers are claiming?
Fine line for error, right?
Very, very fine line. And the penny didn't drop until I put about a quarter of a teaspoon into a pint glass of water years ago. And I did a pH test on it, and it just blew me away. The pH dropped below 2. So I had a tiny quarter of a teaspoon of this DMPT. But then it got me thinking, is my application of this all wrong? Am I putting it in a bait whereby I'm using a gram and a half in a kilo of base mix? Am I using this wrong? And now my thoughts are slowly changed to whereby I think it's much more effective, even though it should only be used in a hook bait lure scenario. It's far more effective in a liquid
applicated to a bait after. So soaking.
Personally, dissolve it in a little bit of warm water, mix it with a little bit of hydro, and then coat your boilies or your hook baits or whatever.
You're worth saying that again. We're not allowed to put that in feed baits.
You're not allowed to. But at the end of the day, I'm not here to police what
No.
Allowed and not allowed to do, because that's entirely up to them at the end of the day. Because we know there is people using certain substances and certain things out there that are well beyond the, let's just say, borderline limits of what's allowed to be used and what's not allowed to be used.
Yeah.
I.e.
Do you want to talk about that some more? Or
not really, no.
Not really? Okay. So switching gears a little bit, flavours. I don't think you have you don't have a huge range of flavours, but some of your flavours are held in very high regard. Is this an area that you've spent a lot of time looking into, or not so much as the, say, hydros or different powders and meals?
I think it's one I've probably neglected because I put so much thought and concentration into the hydrolysates and various other ingredients that you're looking at. You've got to be sensible and say, right, how much time can I realistically devote to this subject? Now, I'm very mindful of certain flavours. It's a chemical makeup that'll do the damage. But cosmetically, there's nothing better than actually smelling a flavour and thinking, that has got to be a winner. I think 99% of us do it, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
When we come up to a particular... I mean, my personal favourite is probably chopped fruit. You know, that bath cell. I mean, I'm not saying you're saying that to sell a few more bottles, because we do sell enough of it.
Yeah.
But I just love that orangey, that berry aroma from it, and it virtually overpowers everything. And what's one man's pain with flavours is another man's gain. You talk to so many people within the industry and on the bank. You know, you might get a guy using a strawberry flavour, and as John Baker quite rightly pointed out of all the 300 different aromas within a strawberry, there's only one that's effective. Well, it was like, well, he knows far more than what I do. But at the end of the day, what I've tried to do with flavours, we did a bit of field testing back in the late 80s for, obviously, the great Rod Hutchinson. And that guy was an absolute legend when it come to flavours. I've held him in such high regard. How he could come out with so many effective flavourings back in his period in time was just phenomenal. You know, he was just on another level altogether when it come to actual flavourings and why, and he understood why they worked.
He must have had a massively deep understanding of it all, because there's no way he would have had enough time to test. If you think how many flavours he brought out and how much testing each one of those, you know, you have to short track that process surely by knowledge of what is going to work.
I think obviously with the EU legislation and the Food Standard Agency classing fishing bait as an animal feed, now all these flavour houses have had to reformulate the flavours so that the EU additive approved. It's a bit like the Kingfisher Red, Robin Red scenario, whereby now they've swapped over to a beetroot powder instead of a synthetic dye, which is obviously a more natural-based beetroot powder that goes into the makeup of the Kingfisher Red and the Robin Red. So now the FSA has decided, right, fishing baits are food classed as an animal feed because there's a lot of people eat fish on the dinner plate, which to me I think it's a load of tosh. It's a recreational sport at the end of the day. As long as you're on a lake or a river, which is recreational fishing, I think there should be a dividing line there between A, feeding an animal, and B, recreational fishing. Yeah, we can't go poisoning the waterway systems and stuff like that with various things, but there should be a line classified from the authorities. Look, this is recreational fishing. It's not as if we're farming or rearing farm fish for the table. Yeah. It's totally different. So with all the regulations around the flavour houses having to reformulate all their recipes of all their flavours they produce over the last 18, 24 months, people come back to you and say, oh, this flavour's changed.
Different.
This flavour's totally different, and this flavour's a bit thinner, this flavour's whatever. Yeah, it is, mate. It is. I'm not going to lie to you. Because of the EU regulations, that they cannot use this chemical because it's not an EU feed-approved additive. You cannot use that anymore in a flavouring. And I think that's where that's hurt the people who rely on flavours a lot.
Yeah, oleoresins resins are obviously a different thing, and they act differently within the bait, but that's something that won't change, right? They're pretty consistent.
I wouldn't have thought so. Not only they're a natural derivative from essential oils, etc.
Yeah.
So you should be fine there.
Yeah.
Obviously work very similar to essential oils as a flavour enhancer type perspective, and one I really rate highly. But flavourings, again, like you said, Bath hasn't got a massive amount of flavourings. Yeah, we could have come out with 200 flavourings, but in reality, out of them 200 flavourings we brought out, how many would effectively work?
Exactly, yeah.
You know, and obviously, hats off to John Baker. He's got a brilliant range of flavourings. The old Nutribates flavourings were held in high regard. Rituous flavourings back in the day, again in high regard. And there is probably Solar's Koi and Octopus Rara, again held in high regard. So, effectively, realistically, how many is there out of 300, 400, 500 flavourings? How many really effectively do work? What is it? Dozen? 20?
Yeah, it's not many.
Personally?
Not many at all. No.
So I think it's one of them. It's a personal choice, you know, and I think because of the nature of the chemical makeup of flavourings, you can easily overdo it. No,
definitely, yeah. And people are people, aren't they? They want to smell it.
They do. Like it's like when you open the bottle top on a flavouring.
Yeah.
They have to smell it.
Yeah.
But what smells to me and you as an apricot, when does a carp ever come across a strawberry, a banana, or a pineapple under the water?
Yeah.
It never does. Unless it's fell from a plant, a tree, or whatever.
Yeah, which is, yeah.
So, from me, I think 90% of it is cosmetic. It's what the angler smells, and he thinks, I'm having some of that, regardless. And I think that's what it is. You know, the nuts and bolts of it all are, the angler wants to smell that within his bait.
Yeah.
It's very much a confidence thing for him. And if it is a confidence thing, and it's working for you, fair play. That's the honest truth about it.
Oh, yeah, and it gets overdone because, obviously, they want to smell that flavour in the finished bait, don't they? Which is often too much.
Yeah, you might have a strong-smelling fish meal ingredient within your bait, and you're putting this nice-smelling strawberry, pineapple, whatever, in there, and using it at the recommended dosage. Like Tutti Frutti is a massively powerful flavour. I'm always banging the drum on when customers ring up, don't use any more than 1.5 mil per 6 eggs. And they're like, you hear the phone go silent for a couple of seconds, and you're thinking, well, is he talking out of his arse here? But I've used that flavour for years and years and years, and in this case, more is not always better.
And then you've got guys like Frank Warwick who are freaking dosing it up and catching loads, and it just... Yeah.
But the thing is, he's using it in a single hook bait scenario, which is massively different. I mean, if you're putting, as an example, this is how I look at the analogy of it. If you're putting, say you're putting 20 mil of, say, Mega Spice, just as an example, in a kilo of bait, and you're thinking, I know it's over the odds, but I'm off for it. And then you go fire out 5 kilo of bait. That's 100 mil of flavouring you've actually put into that lake. Can you really see it being that effective? Because you'll end up repelling.
Yeah.
Because it'll just hardwire the olfactory bulb, and they just will not be able to look at anything.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, going on with home rollers, are there any common mistakes that you see them making time and time again? If you were to speak to the home rollers now, is there anything you would say?
I think the biggest mistake they'll make is overcomplicating. They'll send me a recipe via email, or they'll talk to you on the phone. Can you give us a bit of quick advice? I've got this bait together. What's your thoughts on it? I'll turn around and say that's the longest recipe I've ever seen in my life. There's 22 different ingredients there. So I try and split it down, because I'm more nutritional side of things. I think, right, I need some protein in that bait. I need some carbohydrate. I need some lipid. I need some vitamin, minerals. So I've split it down into them 5 different aspects. Right, and what is a particular ingredient going to do for me? Whey protein concentrate, as an example, the 80% stuff. What's that going to do in a bait? Yeah, we know it's going to fulfill quite a bit of the protein needs of a fish. And has it got any functional ingredients? Does it act as a binder? Is it soluble, etc., etc.? So you've got to look at them, and then I say to people, just keep things nice and simple. Yeah, they've got 3 different flavourings in there, if you see what I mean. They've got 3 different hydros in there, and I'm thinking, why do you want that one in there? Well, because so and so said it was good. No, what is your purpose of putting that in there? Because at the end of the day, it's only going to cost you out of your own wallet. So are you spending X amount at Bath or X amount at Spotted Fin or X amount at CC Moores? But at the end of the day, what's the reality of it? Because the more you complicate it, the more your head's going to be up your ass. And let's be honest, it's not hard to overcomplicate things in bait, is it?
No.
So I just say make things as simple as possible. Yeah, sort your protein level out, and look at your own fishing aspect. Are you going to be concentrating on one water for the next 2 or 3 years? Or are you going to be fishing lots of different venues? You've got to look at it like that and say, right, if I'm fishing one water for the next 2 or 3 years, I want a good quality bait that's going to not blow over that 2 or 3 years. But if I'm fishing a variety of waters, just going with my mates for a social here, there and everywhere, yeah, you can maybe get away with it at the other end of the spectrum.
Interesting, and that's coming from someone who sells bait. So
yeah, I'm totally honest.
Yeah.
Whereby I don't see the need to. If a particular hydro works at 50 mil, and Joe Bloggs is down the road saying, well, mine's working at 150 mil per 6 eggs, and I'm saying, well, you don't need that. I'll save you 2/3 of your money by just putting 50 mil in. It's not needed, pal. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I tell it. If I think he needs more in there, I'll be honest and say, right, come on, line Bath's pocket a bit and stick a little bit more in there. But no, I don't. It's one of them. You've got to be honest, and I think the more honest you are about it, the more people respect you and they think, right, yeah, that's sound advice.
Moving on to a few questions that we got sent to us to ask you. Stephen, and I've forgotten his name.
Robinson?
The guy that does homemade bait buffs. Yeah. Sorry, Stephen. Forgotten your name here.
Yeah, he's
anyway.
Stephen. Only kidding, Stephen.
He asked, have you got any plans to release any of the kind of old school milks, alpha-lactalbumin, etc.?
Right, good question. I've looked at alpha-lactalbumin probably when we first started buying in ingredients for Bath, because I do rate alpha-lactalbumin.
Yeah.
But basically, alpha-lactalbumin's a particular type of whey protein. So there's some very, very poor quality alpha-lactalbumins out there. Now I've got to look at it from a business sense, yeah. I got in touch with Arla Foods, they're a big Danish company who produce a lot of milk proteins. They've obviously got a UK distribution centre. Now Arla Foods gave me 2 types of alpha-lactalbumin. They gave me one that was 10% lactalbumin, and they gave me one that was 20% lactalbumin. Now, at the time, to buy 100% pure lactalbumin, you would probably have to go to somewhere like a company like Sigma Aldrich, and you'd probably be looking at around about £150 a kilo.
Jesus.
Now, for me to buy the 20% alpha-lactalbumin was around about, this is before I got it shipped in from Denmark, it was around about €18 a kilo. Now,
Jesus Christ.
And even the 10% stuff was about €14 a kilo, and this is probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So by the time I'd shipped it across into the UK, realistically, who was going to pay Bath 25, 26, 27, £28 a kilo on it? I can't see there's many uptakers on this. I'd love to bring. I do. Alpha lactalbumin's got a fantastic amino profile to it, and it's a very good ingredient within the manufacture of carp baits. But there's a lot of poor stuff out there. If you see anybody selling lactalbumin, ask them what percent lactalbumin, alpha lactalbumin, is in that produce, because you'd be looking at 2-3%, and the rest is whey protein concentrate.
Interesting. Moving on, insect meal within baits. Is this something that you think we're going to be seeing more of in the future?
I think so, yeah. Insect meal's very, very early days. It's only coming to the fore over the last probably 5-6 years. It's been touted about, as a sustainable replacement. We're still at the early days whereby there's not enough being made.
And when we say insect meal, I mean, there's a lot of different insects, isn't there?
Yeah. I'm predominantly talking sort of like black soldier fly, the mealworms, and maybe the cricket meals and stuff. Producers cannot produce enough of it at the minute, whereas your fish meal producers can produce enough fish meal. So until there's an actual situation whereby we're producing, or the various manufacturers of insects and insect protein are producing enough, and supply becomes saturated, and that'll drive the price down, because the more people producing it, the more that's going to lower the price. So at the minute it's quite at the high end of things, but I think gradually it will get a foothold, and I think it's not a bad thing, is it? You look at the sustainability side of things, they're already doing trials on humans to eat it for the,
Oh yeah, you could get insect bars and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's Yora. They're one of the first pet food companies to pop it into the manufacture of the dog and cat food. So I think it will come. And end of the day, what's more natural to a fish? Apart from, I don't think you're ever going to replicate the live insect, because you look at the way fish react to live naturals as opposed to dead ones. Yeah, I get people's thoughts and whatnot on that, but unfortunately, until we can mimic that live insect, we've still got some searching to do.
Next question is from Cheeky Dinks. It's a good question, this one. What is an undersold product from British Aqua Feeds that you hold in a high regard?
Undersold, probably the beta stim.
Beta stim. Yeah, you mentioned this in the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what that is. What
Basically,
is that?
It's a natural betaine product. We've all heard of betaine HCl, which is a chemically synthetic product. We've all heard of betaine anhydrous, which is a chemically derived product. This is a natural liquid betaine from the sugar beet production. Anybody can do the tank tests on this. It's not that hard to do, and it's not the most expensive product in the world. But by God, is it good? But I know certain companies could say you can't overdo it, but you can. And my effective, or my personal belief on this is that 15 mil per kilo is all that is needed. You can maybe get away with a little bit higher winter, because obviously the fish are cold-blooded, the reaction times are slower, and the sensory ability slows down. So you could probably get away with 20 mil, but that's all you need. And watch the fish's reaction to. Do the tank tests on it. So beta stim, it's not the dearest product in the world, but I just don't think it's caught on with manufacturers and Joe Public and your home bait rollers alike. But it's one of the serious liquids I rate very highly indeed.
What is the method of attraction there? What's it working through?
Quaternary ammonium bases, or quats as we like to call them, without getting too deep into people's heads. They're basically because the beta stim is probably the opposite end of the scale to most liquids. A lot of them are quite acidic, especially hydros and stuff, whereas beta stim's quite alkaline, because obviously the quaternary ammonium compounds within there, and that's what does the damage. But it also acts. Betaine is well known to aid digestion within lots of animals, not just fish, as an osmoregulator, etc. So there is, on top of it being attractive to fish, it's also good for the fish, or good for the animal.
And you said this type of betaine isn't HCl or anhydrous?
It's not HCl, it's not anhydrous, it's a totally natural liquid betaine.
Does it still possess the digestive properties?
Yes.
It does?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It still possesses everything. It's actually, I believe it's made in Russia, of all places.
Okay.
So it's obviously imported in big amounts.
And is this working off of gustation or olfaction?
It'll be through a combination of both. You'll have more of an olfactory stimulation there, because it does contain slight amount of amino acids in there, rather than opposed to taste. But let me get back on that one, because there is something in there that I don't want to disclose. It's the same. A golden oldie to me is molasses. I mean, how cheap is molasses? And I think it's a superb additive. I really do. Given the vitamin and mineral profile of it, and how nutrient dense it is, and fish genuinely like it.
Yeah.
You know. All right, sometimes don't attract the right sort of species that probably the carp anglers and stuff are after. But I just think value for money, molasses is up there with it all.
I think that's just part of how attractive it is. Of course, it's going to attract the bream as well. You know.
Yeah, I think there is that downside to it, but I just think it's one of those forgotten ones.
Yeah.
You know, where probably 20, 30 years ago, a lot of matchmen would include molasses within the manufacture or the makeup of the ground bait and stuff. And it just seems to have gone out of fashion.
Yeah.
You know, people have relied a lot on the hydros and more protein-based stuff, but you look at hydro wheat. Hydro wheat's dominated the market for a few years now. What is it, 6% protein? So it's not all down to like we've explained, don't get too hung up on the hydrolysis side of things. Yeah, they're bloody good, but always keep an open mind. You know, look at the hydro wheat's amylase activity, which is very interesting in breaking down carbohydrates within a bait.
Now, on that note, I've had this chat with Dean Towie, who knows a lot more about bait than I do. But amylase, is this purely working off of just splitting down, say, polysaccharides, disaccharides? Is that the only kind of use it has? Or would you say that there is some chemical reaction byproduct of those saccharides being broken down that is attractive in its own right to cause carp?
You're right in that latter part of what you said. The way... obviously, polysaccharides or long-chain sugar molecules are broken down into what we call di or monosaccharide, into what we call simple sugars such as glucose, fructose. You know, there is a byproduct there. I'm not fully 100%, but I believe it's to do with, again, acids. On the acid side of things, I'm not fully, because it's one I've only just sort of like come across in the last year when we'd done the hydrocorn. I had to study obviously various enzymes from our suppliers, what enzymes they supply to break down the actual corn kernel. So I looked at it, and when you look at the type of acid it gives off during that hydrolysis stage, one of them is ferulic acid, which is very beneficial to fish, which probably, I would dare say, maybe 78% of bait makers have never heard of before. So there's another one. So they're all searching on the keyboards now for ferulic acid. But obviously it's only one I've just come to light about and learned a little bit of knowledge about over the last 12 months, and they've complex carbohydrates is probably more head-banging than the actual proteins themselves.
Yeah.
Just a sheer abundance, and you've got disulfide bridges and everything else that are really hard to split down from, like the chitin, the polysaccharides and the disulfide bridges within the chitin to break down. These are simple, not simple, but the complex carbs. So the study of the Cornwall was certainly an eye-opener to me, and how we transform these complex saccharides, into mono and disaccharides, into simple sugars. And it was like, wow, that's so give me a bit of an eye-opener, that.
Yeah, because it's generally the monosaccharides that we view as being attractive to carp, isn't it? But as you said, I think there must be something else to the carbate, the splitting action of it.
Definitely,
byproducts
100%. So obviously, when I look at certain acids given off during that process, and obviously I've given you that one, ferulic acid, we use a 4-way enzyme treatment of the hydrocorn, believe it or not, even though it's quite a cheap product to buy. The actual shell is the hardest bit
to break down
of the corn kernel to break down. I think if we was to use a particular enzyme, it would take around about 96 hours.
I mean, look at it this way, it comes out in your poop, doesn't it?
Exactly.
And we're pretty good at digesting most
there you
things.
Go. So every time, we've all seen the old sweet corn shell in the poo, haven't we?
Yeah.
But that's just how hard that the actual kernel or the shell bit of the sweet corn is to break down. Even though it's soft to the touch. Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. We've had a lot of questions about that hydrocorn, and I've never used it. Can you expand on that? Is it been well received by the market?
I think the matchmen enjoy it.
Yeah.
I've tried sort of over the last couple of years to diversify a bit with the various hydros, because there's a lot of carp anglers and a lot of carp bait manufacturers, but you've got to look at and think, right, where can I gain business within the angling side of things? The match scene's massive. And I think it's river angling has gained a massive popularity. You look on the banks of the Trent over the last 4 to 5 years, it's virtually doubled overnight. The popularity in barbel fishing. So, as a business, you've got to understand where the trends are going and say to yourself, right, can we target with our products those that make barbel baits? Those that, can we target the barbel anglers with the hydros and stuff, which we know are just as effective for barbel as what they are for carp? So we looked at it, and the hydrocorn, I think people have thought it's sweet corn. Yeah, it's nothing, is it? But you look at the clouding effect that actual hydrocorn gives off. It's absolutely amazing. It just turns everything like a milky yellow.
That's one reason why I like groats. They have a similar kind of effect, and I imagine a lot of people would put those two things together.
But the matchmen certainly, the amount of 500ml and 1 litre bottles we sell, in comparison, we say selling 20 litres to the bait manufacturers or 100 litres to this guy.
Yeah.
The matchmen have obviously cottoned onto it.
Yeah. Interesting. Crayfish hydrolysate, is that something you've ever looked at?
Not a chance. No, I think crayfish meal in its own right is a quite obviously Nashi first brought the key cray to the fore. What had developed, Gary Bays and the other gentleman at Nash, I'm not sure. Mine's gone blank. Who worked alongside developing? Was it Keith Sykes?
Keith Sykes did a lot from here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he helped along with Gary Bays develop the key cray.
He did.
I'm not sure. I'm just trying to recall back in memory. But I think again, around about 40% protein. The only downside to it was when the company that manufactured the crayfish meal made it, they didn't mill the shell down enough in it. So obviously you had this like pinky red shell outer that was quite coarse, like, a bit like oyster shell grit, if you like, but obviously pinky red in colour. And a few people moan about scratching the tables and stuff like that. But the actual meal itself, I do rate. But for, say, every 20 kilo sack of the crayfish meal you're getting, I would have to sieve off half of it.
Yeah.
So I've got to look at, you got to look at costings as a business. Yeah, I can get crayfish meal in it. What are you going to pay for it? £8-9 a kilo to buy in?
Yeah,
and then realistically, what's that going to make in literage? Am I going to have a market for it? So it's one of them. Yeah, I think for the home novice, for him to make a crayfish hydro, yeah, go for it. But I think from a commercial, a business scale, I have to be honest and hold my hand up and say I don't think it's commercially viable.
Yeah. It's interesting. Carp are definitely eating crayfish, so there's that appeal there.
You know, anything like that, and anything insect derived and vertebrate derived and anything like that. Yeah, you've got to look at the natural food sources. Yeah.
Callum, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thoroughly enjoyed looking around.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
To be fair, Sam, I was a bit nervous because I've never done
it's new
a podcast. I've never done any video work as such, so it's all been a bit new to me.
Yeah.
But hopefully the guys like it, and if it's well received, I'll come back and do another one.
Love to have you on. Absolutely. Thanks ever so much.
And thank you.
And that concluded the interview with Callum. After we finished recording, Callum said that he would really like to come on for a part 2, but he would like to get the listeners' feedback. So please either message us or message Callum, probably easier to message us. Let us know what you would like Callum to cover next time. Obviously, he has got a very in-depth knowledge of all manner of different things revolving around creating a bait that is attractive to carp. Let us know. Do you want the real in-depth stuff, or do you want a little bit more kind of, okay, how do I make a bait really attractive to carp, a simple step-by-step type thing, or anything else? Just let us know what it is you want us to cover. Callum's really, really keen to hear what it is people want to learn about, and he's keen to share his knowledge with you, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So message us, let us know what you want us to cover, and we'll be sure to get Callum back on the podcast for another episode. That's it for this one. Thanks ever so much for listening.